episode of What You Doing Podcast, the interview podcast where I talk to cool people about the amazing stuff that they're working on. My name is Matt. This week I'm sitting down to talk with the incredible Satah about their work on the currently running Galactic and Going Rogue Kickstarter, their fantastic actual play podcast Folio, and why a Star Wars actual play that no one talks about anymore is actually the best. I'll talk y'all in the outro, but for now, let's get into it. But Satah, how are you now that we have all that resolved? How are you doing?
Hi, I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Good.
The joy of doing this podcast is like, oh cool, I have an interview scheduled. This is so great. Oh god, I get to stress about it for an entire week. It's fun. It's a fun thing that I've done to myself.
Yeah, I really like it comes with its own stressors, but like the format of my show, meaning that like I just send people off to record, really has its benefits. And one of them is that I'm like, well, it gives me anxiety to give up control in this way, but also it's in your hands now. Good luck.
I just have to wait for you to come back with whatever you did. And I hope that's good.
Yep.
I hope it works.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Video recording is recording. That's good. Okay, good. Everything's good. Yeah, I listened to an episode of Folio the other day.
Mm-hmm.
I know I say this to everybody. It's really good. It was very enjoyable.
Thanks.
I was telling some friends of mine I told a friend of mine who does enjoy solo games and a friend of mine who doesn't enjoy solo games that both of them should listen to the podcast for different reasons.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I've been really happy with I've had a couple of people who tell me that they struggle with listening to actual plays generally, really enjoy it, which is awesome. I mean, I'm a huge fan of actual plays, so it's kind of funny. Like I don't want to be doing the I'm not like other actual plays type thing. But I know that I feel like it does bring some unique, cool stuff for a lot of different types of people. And yeah, I hope that people keep telling two friends about it.
That was my main driving force behind starting the podcast, was the idea of like telling two friends and they'll tell two friends and they'll tell two friends, is the idea of just like, well, I'm going to get the person who made this cool thing and we'll talk about how cool it is. And then hopefully you decide that it's cool. And then hopefully it goes on down the line. Hey everybody, welcome to What You Doing Podcast, the awesome interview podcast where I talk to cool people about the amazing things that they make. I think it's awesome. I threw that in there. That's for me. That's that's to motivate me. Today I'm here with Satah. Satah, say hello.
Hello, I'm Satah. I'm here today.
I have spent so much time over the last couple days making sure I say that name right, because let me tell you, the brain is an interesting creature. Where you see a word and you decide in the moment the way that it's said, and then you hear it differently, and it's a lot of work to make it go the other way.
It is, and I definitely complicated it by the fact that I made it up. Like I named myself when I was young, and when I was an edgy teacher, when I was an edgy teenager, I would tell substitute teachers, they'd be like, "How do you pronounce this?" And I would say like Satan, but you got scared at the end, like Satah. Because people usually want to say Satah, which I totally get, but that's a helpful little mnemonic, I guess.
Like Satan, but you got scared at the end. I'm sure you had a lot of teachers that were just like, what?
Yeah, that's definitely a like, okay, we're gonna keep watch on that one type of comment. That's fair.
for a moment, I was so invested in you as an edgy teacher. I was just so I was like, oh, here we go. This is a story.
Yeah. No, I mean, my family has a lot of teachers in it, and I'm a lifelong contrarian, and so I always knew that I would never become a teacher. It's like the one thing I ruled out really early.
That's fair.
So sadly, no, unless I take a real turn, and I will be edgy. I mean, I look like this, so there will be an edge to it.
I look like this. I love that. Before we get too deep into it, let's do a proper intro. People know who you are, why, you know, what we're here to talk about. I was going to say why they should care, and that's the wrong energy.
Hard pitch.
Yeah. Why? Just, all right, tell me. I'm like, all right.
Justify yourself.
All right. Let's take a good step back.
Yeah, so I'm Satah. I am a TTRPG editor and occasional designer. I make a podcast called Folio, where I have a couple guests on to play the same solo game as me, just totally separately, and then I weave all of the playthroughs together to show off like different experiences of solo and self-paced games. Technically, the full tagline is solo and epistolary games, but the current epistolary game that I'm recording has been going on for nearly a full calendar year, so I haven't like totally delivered on that promise yet. And I'm also pretty involved in an ongoing crowdfunder at the moment for Galactic and Going Rogue, which is one of the reasons I'm hopping on to talk a little bit about like actual play and stuff in that. And the least relevant in some ways, but also very big thing that I do is a bunch of music. I have a singer-songwriter project called People You Meet Outside of Bars, and an experimental noise and poetry project called Piloting the Animal. You can find all of my work just generally at gaygothvibes.online. And I'm also on Blue Sky at posetachips.gaygothvibes.online. It's very long. I had to register a subdomain to make it as long as it is. It's funny to me.
Social media usernames come in two flavors, and it should only be these two flavors. One, your actual legal name. Two, something that is so long and ridiculous to say out loud, it's almost not worth it.
Yeah. I've told this anecdote a lot recently because I keep making fun of my Blue Sky username, but as I said, one of my musical projects is called People You Meet Outside of Bars, and I used to play a lot of shows, and I had somebody come up to me and say, at a show, they were like, wow, that was great. I'm so sad that I didn't see you before, but I've seen your posters all over town for months and months, and I never went because I thought you were an improv group. And I'm like, so fair. I would have multiple bands who I played with contact me to be like, we don't know how to fit your name on the poster. And I'm like, yeah, sorry. Good luck.
Yeah.
Do whatever you want with it. I don't know.
That's God. I love the energy of that. Just like, yeah.
Yeah, I know. You're not the only one.
You could change it. No, I don't think so. I don't think I'm gonna do that.
I did change it. I mean, that project, when I started technically when I was a teenager, and I was posting videos on YouTube under Duckies Are the Best Animal. And then because you know what? I was a teenager in the mid 2000s and I had a ukulele and it was very cute.
I think if you gave me, I think I would bet you $20. It's like what musical instrument am I using? My channel name is Duckies Are the Best Animal. I would be like $20. It's ukulele.
Yeah. And then I released an album and changed it to the somewhat edgier but equally unwieldy People You Meet Outside of Bars. Because I was like, it's, you know, I guess I could take a name change as an opportunity to sort of streamline it, but I'm not going to. I'm going to make it worse.
No, don't listen. Don't hide your light under a bushel basket. It's called what it's called.
Yeah.
Deal with it.
Yeah, exactly.
I love this. Part of why I started this show and part of why I continue to enjoy doing the show. People contain such multitudes, man. I love it. I love hearing about all of the silly little things people do with their time, all of the fun little ways that they devote their energy, all of the little creative things they bring into the world. It's honestly just such a treat.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So first, Satah, thank you for being here today. It's always fantastic. So Galactic and Going Rogue is on Kickstarter now. We'll say it here at the top. All the links to everything will be in the show notes. So, you know, links to the Kickstarter, all of that. Should still be live by the time you hear it. It's got a nice, good campaign left. It is the second edition of Galactic by Riley Rethal and Going Rogue by Jess Levine, which, Satah, you were a contributor on?
Yeah, I have worked with Jess on essentially all of her tabletop projects at this point, and I think my exact credits on Going Rogue are systems design consultant. I might have also edited for it a little bit. I don't strictly remember. It's all a little bit nebulous and that kind of thing. I have done a lot of editing for her work, but I think systems design consultant is my usual credit on Going Rogue.
It sounds very complicated from a fun title, like a fun credit.
Yeah, I think it is sort of the most efficient and technical sounding way to phrase I love to talk about game mechanics and game philosophy, and I'm really into specifically talking about the ways that game mechanics, what they say about the story that you're trying to encourage people to tell. And so Jess and I had a lot of conversations about pillars, like the settings essentially in Going Rogue. In Going Rogue, you're playing as part of a rebellious movement, and it really gets into the specifics of like what makes up a political movement. And there are two different pillars called the Parliament and the Intelligence that are sort of generally, Parliament is like let's talk about stuff, and the Intelligence is like let's do things at all costs sort of stuff. And we had a lot of conversations about balancing it to make sure that neither of them was the good guy or the bad guy, that both of them are really important contributors to liberation, that a movement that is all about action without any regard for consequences for its members and for the people it's trying to help is just going to sort of continue the cycle of violence that it's supposed to be stopping. But also a movement that never does anything because it's scared of consequences or scared of being seen as too extreme. It also isn't doing anything. So, like, it's understandable to be more frustrated at one of those than the other, especially in our current political climate. But for the story that she's trying to tell, it was important to sort of balance that. And we had a lot of conversations about that and just like various other little things that are about like how do I mechanize an intense relationship between characters? How do I like integrate that thematic stuff into the token economy of a belonging outside belonging game? And this, as you can tell by how long I've been talking uninterrupted about it, is something that I geek on really, really hard and love to talk about and chat about with creators and like with writers and people who are making games. And basically all of that felt like probably systems design consultant is the thing that I did.
It does sound like the title you get when you do you have it written down. You're like systems consultant. It's like, well, that's system mechanic consultant. No, that sounds too systems design consultant. Does that feel? Yeah, okay, we'll come back tomorrow. We'll see how it is.
Yeah, it's very much a like, it's you throw that on the resume assuming that you're going to have some room for bullet points kind of explaining what you actually did. And that's fine.
Yeah, on the Kickstarter, Going Rogue bills itself, and I love this. I had to pull it up to get it exact. Going Rogue bills itself as a game of cynicism, hope, and the ultimate sacrifice, which I think if you look at that book and then you hear that tagline, you might feel a small amount of disconnect, but I think that is mostly due to the art trying to capture a very specific setting feel, and the tagline sort of getting a specific like narrative vibe. It's
definitely, I mean, having to like bundling both games together when like, they are both telling Star Wars-esque space operatic stories, but with very different theming, and like having to create something that shows off both of them, I think has probably been a fascinating challenge. I am a distinctly non-visual person, so I'm terrible at understanding the choices that get put into that. But I know that like the team that Jess and Riley have working on the visuals have like really had to hit a fascinating balancing act of like, how do we portray both of these games with very different viewpoints and moods in one thing? Yeah,
it's like some sort of big movie box set where it's like, okay, we want to make sure we capture the sort of overall arch, and we want to make sure the definition between these two things is specific but cohesive. And
yeah,
it's a juggling act, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, right up at the top, we got to say, hell of a time to watch a Star Wars thing, huh? Like, not only the ongoing BDS protests, but also hot on the heels of Andor season 2. Like, what a weird heaven and hell situation for this sort of project.
Yeah, I mean, I know that was partially very much on purpose, just because like Going Rogue specifically is very much inspired by Rogue One. It's how do I tell a Rogue One story? Whereas Galactic is the sort of the broader original trilogy Star Wars movies, I'd say. And so when Jess and Riley were looking to do this, to like print the books together and get them out there, they were like, ooh, what's a fun thematic date that we could tie it to for marketing purposes and that kind of thing. Andor season 2. And then I think there was a little bit of a, Andor season 2 aired in 4 weeks rather than 12. And just, it's, it is definitely an odd time. And also, yeah, specifically, I know that it was a complicated discussion about what to do with that when it came to BDS making Disney Plus a priority target. And I think it's great that they're raising a lot of awareness for that cause by being like, hey, yes, this is related to Andor in some ways, and also don't give Disney Plus any money because of this boycott. I know that is a very difficult balance to strike, especially given just everything that is going on in the USA with making things being complicated. So yeah, it's a lot, but it seems like it's going well. And I mean, I have my own opinions on how Andor season 2 went. But a lot of people really loved it, and I hope that it inspires them to check out the games. And I hope that even people like me with some feelings take it as an opportunity to be like, what if I told a story that I liked in these games? Yeah, because that's ultimately what it is about. It's like, what's the stuff we love in this franchise or this genre space? How do we extract the stuff we love and discard the stuff that we don't to tell a story that like we fit into? That's kind of, I think, a lot of the ultimate goal of them. And it's great. They do it really well. And I think it's I mean, I often think that media you don't like is more inspiring than media you do, because it kicks your brain into like, but how would I do that? How would I do this? How do I fix this? So maybe it's good. Maybe it ties in together.
That was the exact feeling I had when we finished Severance season 2. I was like, we finished last episode, and we were eating dinner, so like we went and cleaned up and all of this, and we came back to the living room, and I was like, okay, here's what I would have changed. It's been 10 minutes. I have all of my thoughts. Let's go.
Yep. I've processed and I'm ready. I could put together a PowerPoint presentation right now if you needed me to.
I have not yet watched Andor season 2. We're planning a watch party with some friends in a Discord. Because, it's just fun to watch stuff with friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that does mean I'm still dodging all the spoilers and things, which like
it is brutal out there.
People don't know. I bring this up all the time. Back when Game of Thrones was airing every week, I mean, one of the things I don't miss about Twitter, people were rabid to post about it. People were I would get into work at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and there would be posts from people at 5 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. They're like, oh my God, did you see? And it's like, no, I didn't. Because it's 7 in the morning.
I kept watching Game of Thrones for longer than I wanted to, in part because it was one of the only things that I could talk to my coworkers about. It was one of the only things we had in common. And it probably didn't help the show's case with me that I ended up resenting it deeply, because I was like, I don't want to watch this the night it airs. I don't want to watch it at all, but I specifically don't want to watch it right away, but I have to, because I
have to build my schedule around this thing that I don't even want to watch in the first place.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that sounds like a pain. I hate that.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, going back, I put this on Blue Sky under one of Jess's posts. I said specifically how much I respect her specifically and clearly every time talking about the game and talking about the Kickstarter and bringing it up, being like, hey, by the way, don't watch Andor, don't subscribe to Disney Plus. I think in the way that in the video game space, Microsoft was very recently made a priority BDS target in the same way that Disney was. Mm-hmm. In the way that the video game space overall is completely failing to talk about it and address it in a like real material way. Mm-hmm. It is incredible to see individual people who, I think you could make the argument that Jess doesn't really have to talk about it because nothing she is doing is connected. I also think you could make the argument that she does because of what it's drawing on. And I think this is one of those, like, it erring on the side of caution and being clear in your political stance on the situation, I think is better overall, because if nothing else, someone might see that and go, hey, now wait, what's happening?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what seems to happen every time I post about the Microsoft boycott, is someone will be like, I haven't seen this. And I'm like, well, yeah, because nobody's talking about it.
Yeah. And I totally get where you're coming from and agree with you about it not technically being a responsibility that she has to carry. And I know for a fact that she would deeply disagree. That especially just the two of them are Jewish and they are very dedicated anti-Zionists. And so I think that they would probably say that it is a responsibility, and we can quibble forever about what it means to have a responsibility to do something or talk about something and support something. But that's kind of what it comes down to, is that I think that they felt they did. And that's one of the reasons they're so dedicated. And Jess specifically, because she's talking about it so much more, is very dedicated to saying it every single time. And I know that some people get sick of it and they're like, people who are very in a bubble and don't understand that they're in a bubble are like, everyone always knows that. Like, why are you even talking about this? But similarly, I see it every single time people talk about it. There's somebody being like, oh, I didn't know. And so it's worth it. It's worth it, even if sometimes people complain and are weird.
Wait, people complaining being weird? On
no,
the internet?
I know, it's shocking.
On social media? Are you sure?
Yeah, I know.
That doesn't
I was really surprised to learn about it too.
on the leftist echo chamber, bluesky.com?
Oh, that's what that is, huh?
Oh, that's what yeah, there's been a whole thing today of people talking about how Blue Sky is dying because post and engagement is down and brands aren't interested. And so from those two people, like three, I'm going to say it, bozos, who are upset that Adobe can't be on Blue Sky, there have been so many people that are just like, good. Good. I don't want a brand friendly microblogging website. That's fine.
I mean, I don't like Blue Sky, and I think it's probably the worst social media website I've ever been on. But I wish that it weren't in some ways necessary, because of the weird fractured thing that social media has become, and it sucks. But like, yeah, who cares? Like,
yeah, like what? That's the thing. Who cares? Why do you care?
That's goofy.
I'm glad. I want to say society in this moment. It's not society, but it's like it's online people. It's online weirdos I'm glad we've moved past the idea that you have to like these websites, that you have to like, that you have to be a shooter for Blue Sky. You don't, who cares? I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I'm glad that we're moving that stance of just like, I don't care if this website makes money. Whatever.
Yeah, I wish they didn't have to, because I wish that co-host still existed. And I wish that we had a system that would allow the destruction of the tyranny of platforms. But we don't at the moment, and so we're just gonna kind of keep stumbling along with subpar things that work well enough until everything explodes or something good happens. Those are kind of the options as I see them.
We're gonna stumble along with Blue Sky until we finally hit the Mad Max future. And then if you want to have a disagreement with somebody online, you got to take it to the Thunderdome, and you got to decide how important is that argument? How important is it? Are you willing to bungee
die
jump?
In this hill? Will you die in this pit?
Yeah, will you die? Are you gonna die? You got to die in the cage. Is that?
Yeah.
Do you feel confident in your skills to bungee jump and grab that chainsaw?
Yeah.
If not, keep those. That's the weirdest tangent we've ever been on. Thank you for going on it with me. Thank you for
no problem.
Thank you for exploring this space. In much the same way, Going Rogue, terrible segue. Going Rogue is so interesting. I really love belonging outside belonging games. I think they exhibit such an amazing mechanical narrative is the thing that draws me to it the most, right? Because I think any game can say, and I feel like this is the thing you're going to get really excited about, because we've been talking for 5 minutes, and I feel like this is perfectly your vibe. I say this all the time. I'm a big system matters girly, right? The game that we choose to play is what informs our story. It's what informs what we care about. Any game can say, okay, we're brother and sister. Okay, cool. We're brother and sister. I'm going to write it down. Whatever. You know, is there a reason that you and I being brother and sister in this game matters? You know, does that make it easier for us to help each other in combat, social, whatever situations? Does that make it harder? Does that make us interacting as characters mechanically easier or harder? Does that mean we have specific mechanical obligations to each other? And that's why I think belonging outside belonging is such an interesting like evolution from those games, is because it's like, yes, it does. Specifically, it is interested in you being your worst self and your best self in equal measure. In the moments that you wish you could be your best self, the game wants you to be your worst self. And I think that's really narratively exciting, because I think it's so easy in a lot of games to be like, well, I'm going to be the best character ever. I'll always do all the good things, and I'll be good, and everyone will love me. And I think in a way that, like, there's probably more examples, but for me, in a way that really only Fiasco kind of manages to do, it manages to push you using mechanical like means, like very clear, like carrot on a stick moments of like, but what if, don't you want to go a little nuts?
Yeah.
Don't you know, in a very clear way that you're just like, but if I got a token right here, then I have a token. And that's great, because I there's nobody that likes to play games that wouldn't be interested in like, do you want a token? You can use a token later. This is how you get it. And I think Going Rogue, the framing of Going Rogue specifically, the internal and external conflicts of the members of the group and the overall, the members of the group, the pillars of the overall rebellion, and then the overall conflict, is so many fun layers of friction. Friction's a word that I'm really starting to love. Like specifically. I don't know. This is a lot just about what's cool. This didn't really end in a question. I feel like it's part of, I feel like a lot of that is like baked into belonging inside belonging.
Yeah.
What is it about Going Rogue, or what is it about belonging inside belonging games that made like that strengthens Going Rogue, that really like pushes those relationships?
That's a really cool question. I would say that it's almost that it's in philosophical agreement with the mechanics, the token economy of belonging outside belonging games, and also honestly specifically the evolution of belonging outside belonging games that Riley encouraged with Galactic. The way that I believe that Riley having the pillars interact with the token economy was something that she put in for Galactic. Going Rogue does the same thing, and I think like, as you're saying, the game encourages you to collaboratively make a mess. You gain narrative power by putting yourself in a vulnerable position. It is like you need to see your hero fail before they succeed. This is how characters in movies also gain narrative power, is by even in rom-coms, right? You need to see your love interest stumble and lose their job and spill their coffee on themselves in front of a really cute girl before they get the girl and they get the promotion and whatever. They gain this like narrative momentum by failing, and then it pays off later because they are able to succeed because they have that narrative momentum. And that is the entire structure of a belonging outside belonging game. Fail now so you can succeed later. Or if you're me, just continually fail and gather tokens and never do a strong move ever because it's my favorite thing. And because of that, because this game, this system asks you so much, like, get your character in trouble. You if you are sitting down, in order for you to have a successful game, in order for you to fully engage with the game, you need to be ready to complicate your own life and the lives of everyone at your table, because you also need to know how to play into their negative moves. You need to know, like, if somebody says, okay, I'm going to use my weak move, disbelieve somebody who I should trust in a conversation with you, you have to play into that. You have to be like, okay, let me give you a reason to trust you. Let me react properly to give this the narrative weight that it should have. And because it is a jamless game, you have to complicate each other's lives. And if you're using the pillar moves, the setting moves, a lot of those are about setting up problems. The most used move in the game possibly is the mandates foreshadow a larger threat and give someone a token. You really have to be at all times ready to have fun making things worse. And I think Going Rogue, in a lot of ways, takes that to its logical extreme. It says, like, okay, you have these characters, they are going to die, but they're going to succeed. What does that mean? Like, what does it mean for, how does it feel for you to play out these characters, knowing that ultimately they're not going to make it out of this situation, but you know, they're getting the biggest token of all time by dying, like the weakest move possible, the most vulnerable thing your character can do, straight up die. Which I should say isn't the only option. Technically, you can escape and it becomes your responsibility to like spread the word to the galaxy about what happened and that kind of thing. But usually you're probably going to die. And so, yeah, the most, like, kill your character. And then the strongest possible move is you did it. Your death secured the success of your mission and bettered the galaxy. And we know that to be true. That is like an ontological truth about the universe, that you have to be in agreement with if you are playing this game as it asks you to. And so I really do think that adds so much like of an extra dimension to the game that would be really different if it wasn't such a collaborative experience. I think that it could work in sort of a standard GM style game. I'm sure that there are a lot of games that explore fate and that sort of thing in a really interesting way. But I do think that it means a lot for it to be something that you are all agreeing to together and then playing out. And yeah, it really is like it all ties together thematically and philosophically from a game design perspective in a way that tickles my brain. I just find it so satisfying.
Yeah, there's nothing I love more than everybody having a sheet of unique rules in front of them and passing all the little tokens around to make the story move. That's very enjoyable.
It's so good, and it is a much more difficult design space than I think people give it credit for. Because a well-designed this is true of a lot of games generally, but like belonging outside belonging games have to hit this perfect balance of like moves have to inspire you and help you, like lead you to a narrative and work with your play style, but also have to be like broadly applicable in a way that like makes them useful. And hitting that balance is really hard. And there are belonging outside belonging games that I haven't, like I've played a lot of belonging outside belonging games, and there are still games that I struggle with because I feel like they don't provide me with enough guidance. But these games specifically, I think, really nail that balance, and just like it's so satisfying to look at your list of moves and be like, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to do here. I'm going to gain a token for this thing, or I'm going to give you a token because it sounds like you are setting me up to ask a question that's on one of my lateral moves, so I can empower you by giving you a token. It's I genuinely don't remember how I got on this whole tangent, but I like it.
It's just the journey of the podcast. You just you find your way.
Yeah.
I started listening to some of the Going Rogue actual play that that came out recently on the amazing One Shot Network. Links to that will also be in the show notes. I haven't listened to the Galactic one yet. Obviously I'm going to listen to the Going Rogue one first because obviously. But I was so immediately struck by everyone was bought in immediately, and there was like a tension in the audio, like as everyone was talking, everyone was bought in immediately to make it as bad and complicated as possible. And I love it exactly. Austin said at the top and I rated it to my partner because I'm a big Friends of the Table fan. So, I know what Austin's going to do. And then he said the damn thing. And I was like, okay, cool. We're here for it. He was like, this is a one shot. We need to be as messy and bad and complicated as possible immediately. And I feel like I feel like I felt everyone at the table like straight, like lock in at that moment. I'm just like you were forming Voltron, like, yup, here we go.
It is like an unbelievable crew of people. I mean, Jess brought me on to edit the actual plays really early, and me actually getting cast on one of them happened later. And just to be able to like sit at a table with those 4 people and like build this world and interweave our characters in these deeply messy, satisfying ways was like such a treat. Just it's so cool. And it's like, I mean, character creation in Galactic and Going Rogue is some of my favorite character creation of all time, and it has like permanently influenced how I approach character creation in other games. And so being able to do that with a group of people who was, as you say, just absurdly locked in to making it, like, to raising the stakes, it's so good and it's so fun.
It was just I'm hesitant to listen to more because I know I'm gonna want more immediately, and so I might wait until the second part is out and just blitz through it.
Absolutely.
I talked to Jason Cordova recently, which is out now, and he was talking about the importance of actual play for games in the space right now. Was that a thing kind of early on, as far as you know, in the discussion of the crowdfunding campaign? Was the actual play like, this is a thing we should do as part of the marketing and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely like a very early decision. And I'm not totally sure, like, I know that in part it's about having something to talk about. Like, I mean, I believe very strongly in actual play as educational material, and I understand that that is not a universal perspective on actual play. I personally think good actual play, or actual play that I like, makes you better at playing a game because you hear how people talk about what they're going to do, and you hear them make decisions, and it helps like connect neurons in your brain of being like, ooh, here's how I can make different decisions, and here's how I can engage with this game. But I know that Jess, like, prioritized it really early because, yeah, it is the best way I think we currently have to show off, like, here's what it feels like to play this game. Because you can read a book as many times as you like, and especially if you have a lot of experience, you might be able to simulate what it probably feels like to play, but you don't really know until you experience it being played in some way. And so that was definitely like a priority. And also it's just like it's a fun opportunity to like reach out to a bunch of people who have a history with the game. Like on the Going Rogue actual play, Austin Walker and Natalie Watson are both on it, and like they played Going Rogue on A More Civilized Age with Jess, which was like a cool sort of milestone in the game's history. And just overall, this whole project has been this enormous celebration of the game's history, like trying to pull in people like, hey, you were really important in early development for this reason. You did a galactic actual play really early. You, me, literally helped make the game a little bit. Come be involved. And so, like, it's a lot of different things, definitely. And it was like such a process to get it together, and so worth it, especially now that it's coming out and people are like hearing it after like several months of it just existing on my hard drive. Oh boy, it's awesome. I think I kind of forgot that other people would experience it because it's been so long.
What a nice thing we did just for me to have.
Yeah, that was exciting. What's next?
Yeah, I'm so glad we did this. That's nice. Yeah, I think I agree 100%. Like the actual play is so immediately engaging from someone. I was familiar. I was more familiar with Riley's game, and it's just so immediately engaging to be like, oh, here's a new game. Hey, you know what's cool? These people over here, they played it, and you can just listen to them do it. And there's no shortage of incredible people in the actual play space that would just, if you spend a little bit of time and you get, either the right established group, or you handpick like 3, 4, 5 people, whatever makes sense, you can very easily put together a group of people that will incredibly highlight the strengths of your game and be like, boom, this is what a very good example of this looks like.
Yeah. And I know that was a huge priority for Jess in casting because, there's a Galactic actual play and a Going Rogue actual play. And so there's 10 people involved. And I know that she had like this whole list of people being like, okay, who can I see playing really successfully in the sort of like hopeful, slightly lighter tone of Galactic versus who could really lean into the like darkness, increased darkness of Going Rogue. And it comes back to sort of what we talked about a little bit earlier about the interesting thing of like trying to showcase these two fairly different games as one unit. There comes a point, I think, where it's like, well, we don't have to. They are different. They're just different. So let's highlight the different strengths of them with who we show playing them and that kind of thing. And I edited both, so I got very intimately familiar with how different both games are in the actual play, and it worked. She nailed it. That's the goal achieved, basically.
With the production of the actual plays, was there guidelines sort of, like after casting of like, okay, here's who we're going to have, was there a sort of like written production draft or something that's like you mentioned, like highlighting the strength of each game, like make sure you highlight these mechanics, make sure you highlight these mechanics, make sure you focus on these themes?
Oh, only a little bit, in that, like, Jess and I guess, as sort of co-producer, talked specifically with the facilitators. So Jeff Stormer facilitated the Galactic game and Austin Walker facilitated the Going Rogue game. They are GM-less, but those two were sort of the like guiding lights, and then keeping the narrative flowing and that kind of thing. And I know that we, had some conversations just about like, show people that it's GM-less. Tell them what that means. Encourage people to really fully utilize all of the elements in character creation and that kind of thing. And it's one of those things that, like, those conversations were really cool and important. And also, Jeff and Austin both know what they're doing. Like, all of the players are so good and experienced that, like, there wasn't really a lot of guidance needed in some ways, because like, that's the other thing. They're good games. If you sit down and play them, it's probably gonna be good in a lot of ways. And so there definitely was like, I'm trying to remember. I think, we would have a little meeting before the recordings to basically say like, hey, everybody, remember, this is a GM-less game. You have shared authorship. If you want something to happen, make it happen. Remember that we can do these pillar moves. Remember that you are allowed to take ownership over the space in some ways and don't have to just always defer to somebody, even if there is a facilitator. And then on the, more production side, I would come in and say, hey, also, as an editor, I'm here to make sure that you sound good and that everything that you come across well. And so, like, don't be nervous. If you want to repeat a line because you stumbled in a line and you don't like that, that's okay. This is a heavily edited show. Like, and it doesn't, like, the editing is important, but I think in a lot of ways more important than that is getting people to relax and know that, like, they can take their time and they don't have to stress. And we're not streaming. You don't have to just keep talking. You don't have to always be on. You can take a moment and think. And if it sucks to listen to, it'll get edited down. It's not a problem. Because I think, people who are paying more attention to making a good show than they are to playing the game, they might still play the game really well and it might be a great show, but I think that actual play performers should be able to just focus on playing the game and have the show come together out of that material after. And like, just focus on the game. That's your responsibility right now. We'll take care of the rest, basically.
It's a thing I've noticed and sort of remarked, and my partner and I just had a conversation about. We've been watching Devil's Plan on Netflix. Which is great and people should check out. It's a Korean variety show, which I mentioned only because this seems to be the sort of standard, and it's probably a reality show thing also. I just don't watch a lot of reality shows. They will shoot whatever is happening from 15 different angles.
Yeah. There
will be a camera on every single person, every single contestant. There'll be a wide shot. There'll be like a 3/4 shot. There'll be a side over shot. And what this lets them do, like you said, like the show comes together in the edit. And we were talking about this last night with the episode that we just watched, where it was roughly halfway through. And I had sort of noticed the way that they were building towards, it felt like they were building towards a story. And I was like, I wonder if this person gets eliminated in this episode, because we're seeing a lot of this character.
Yeah.
At the beginning, we saw a lot of this character talking about how strong he felt and how strong his team was going to be in the game. And then we've seen them kind of fall through this, and we're putting a lot of focus on not like his hubris or his downfall, but like his emotions in this moment. And so I'm like, I wonder if this character gets eliminated because all of that storytelling through the edit. And that wasn't a thing he was thinking of in the moment. You know, he wasn't upset because he was like, I talked all that trash. He was upset because he was losing, you know, and he thought his team was going to get eliminated. And I think in a similar thing for actual play, there's a lot of conversation around what is a good actual play. And as a person who just kind of enjoys actual play, I think there's a lot of right answers.
Absolutely.
And I think it's one of the situations where it's like the only wrong answer is thinking that your answer is the only right one. I do like in actual plays when they tell you what's going on at a mechanical level, when they talk through their decision making process, and when they say like, oh, I could do this, I could do that, I could do whatever. Because I think that is the strength of the medium versus something like a TV show where the things just occur and you get to see them in sort of the same time that the characters do. In an actual play, you get to see things as the characters do, but then you also get to see, to some extent, all of the alternate versions of that scene. You get to see the scene where they walk back in and talk to whoever, or they leave in a huff and they have a big fight, or you see the scene where they drive off in the car, and that's just interesting. It's just an interesting way to experience a story. That's kind of, that's unique to this sort of medium, this sort of, TTRPGs in general, especially when there are ways that interacting with those other characters are mechanized and incentivized and de-incentivized. And and that's always part of the conversation as well, is like, well, if we get in a big fight and I make an asshole of myself, I'll get a token, and then maybe later I can do a thing because I have a token, or let me do this thing so that I, if I have to roll, I'll fail and maybe I'll get an advance. And all that. I try not to like have too many hard hot takes on this show, just because I don't want anybody to get like, I don't want anybody to feel like my hot take is targeted at them specifically, when 100%, 9 times out of 10, I'm just like, this thing is silly. And I don't mean anybody as an individual, but yeah, I love actual plays when they are edited to the extent that they are not boring. And I think that's a very fine touch, and I think that's different for different people, and it's different for different scenarios. And in much the same way, like I said, like the only wrong answer is thinking that there's a one size fits all.
I mean, it's always interesting to me. I think like I've been listening to podcasts for a long time. I got my first iPod when I was working as a hotel housekeeper in like 2008 or 2009 or something like that, 2010 maybe, and started listening to. At the time, it was a lot of like alt comedy podcasts and stuff, but then also discovered fiction podcasts and that kind of thing. And actual play for me came a little bit later. And I got into actual play because I love games. I want to hear people playing games. That is what I come to actual play for. If I want a highly produced narrative, I go to scripted fiction. And there are interesting, like improvised fiction is interesting and cool. And just usually I look for it in a different place. And so I definitely prioritize actual play that shows games off very actively. And you can hear it in how I edit Folio, especially, that like, I want it to be good radio, but I'm leaving in table talk, even as a solo game, which often is people being like, I'm not necessarily leaving the entire 7 minutes that somebody spends looking up synonyms of a word to name their corporation or whatever, but I will leave in them saying like, okay, I'm going to go to relatedwords.io and I'm going to look at words that are related to aluminum. Ooh, here's a couple of options. Okay, cool. Here's what I settled on. In reality, that process might have taken 7 minutes and isn't great radio. I'm not going to leave in the whole 7 minutes, but I am going to leave in the thought process, because to me, that's what I want from actual play. And I'm always really curious about, like, there are these conversations about, like, developing systems for actual play, like TTRPG systems that are developed specifically for the purpose of actual play, that I think like it's an interesting conversation, and I like seeing people talking about it and engaging with it. And it also baffles me in some ways because it feels antithetical to what I think actual play is about, which is like playing the game, like playing any game. And there are some games that don't work for actual play, probably, I guess. That I don't know, but like, yeah, I love games. I love games a lot, and I love hearing people play games, and that is what I want from my actual play. If an actual play edits out a lot of mechanical stuff, it might still be a great story, but it's probably not going to be a priority for me personally to engage with it, because that's what I'm looking for. I want to hear you talk about why you're rolling dice, and then I want to hear you roll those dice and then react to it and stuff.
Can I say you hit on exactly the thing that I was talking around and didn't want to say specifically because I didn't want anybody to. I have a very similar feeling around like the concept of designing a system for an actual play, because I think it is, like you said, an interesting conversation. I think it's an interesting experiment, and do it and we'll see. I never want my opinions on things to come across as like, don't do this thing in 100%. These sort of situations. Like, do it. I would love to see what the end result is. I want to
know what you prioritize. Like, that's so fascinating to me. It'd be like, what do you think an actual play needs? Like, how are you mechanizing that? Like, what does that mean to you? That is so cool to me as like a line of design thought for sure. But so similarly, I'm like, yeah, go ahead.
It could be cool. Once we get to the end of it, it could be cool. But in a similar way, I'm kind of like, I feel like doing that, making a game specifically for an actual play, it feels like you're not putting the cart before the horse. It feels like you're misunderstanding what a cart and a horse are for.
Right.
And so it's like I feel like you're taking two things and then trying to put them in such a way. It feels like you're trying to make a cart that a horse rides, but also pulls.
Yeah.
And that maybe it works. Maybe that's how we invented saddlebags. I don't know.
Maybe.
But I think it's very, I like you said, the conversation around what do you find interesting in actual play? What's valuable? What's interesting radio? And you got there ahead of me. I was going to use this segue very cleanly into folio. I think folio does, for me, in my opinion, a really, really good job of walking that line of keeping things moving, of keeping you as the listener engaged, and leaving in the table talk, leaving in those moments of like, because a solo game could be boring to listen to if it was just like, okay, here's a 2-hour MP3 of me playing this game. It could be very uninteresting to listen to. But the one thing that I think folio is a masterful idea is having multiple people do it separately. I think that's such a stroke of genius. I think that's one of those like brilliant moves that gives it such a unique feel of 3 people telling a story in isolation, and then you edit it together so that it almost feels like a conversation. I listened to episode 1 of Village Witch because you had Agatha on it. Agatha's great. And there's a point near the end of the first episode where you edit it in such a way it almost feels like the two of you are talking.
Yes.
Like it almost feels like you're responding to each other in a way that was amazing. It was great. And I think that's the value of actual play, because if you were playing together, that moment doesn't have the same sort of like excitement of audio of like, oh wow, that was a fun moment right there. And hearing the 3 stories sort of develop simultaneously but separately, I think is so fun. I told Jess that I had seen someone talk about folio on Blue Sky at some point in the past, and I had subscribed, because when I went to look it up, I was like, oh, this is already in my podcatcher. Like I'm already subscribed, but I knew it wasn't anything from you because I wasn't following you or the show.
Oh, interesting.
So just some other person had said something good about it.
Love to hear that.
Yeah. Which was very funny. Speaking of folio, what was the moment that you like, because there's, you know, I'm sure 100 moments that you were like, I want to do an actual play podcast. Maybe you'll do this. What was the moment that it sort of crystallized into folio, that it became this thing?
Oh, that's a great question. So, because it was an idea that I had several years ago, actually. So I think there are a few markers along the way. One is I got on ADHD meds and suddenly could do things.
Oh, bless.
Yeah, a huge game changer for me. And
people don't know the cheat code of like having your brain work correctly.
Yeah, it turns
so
out
much.
It really enables you to make stuff happen in a way that isn't true when your brain doesn't work. And I think there was some personal growth that I needed to go through, in that I am a very neurotic person and I struggle with taking up other people's time. So even when it's a cool opportunity that would be fun to collaborate on, I have historically had an enormous amount of stress to be like, hey, do you want to be on my podcast? Because I'm like, who am I to ask to take up 3 hours of this person's life that, like, we only get so many hours in a life? Like, who am I? And I literally had to spend several years, like, working on that anxiety.
I'm talking to the listener right now. I have no idea what that's like.
Yeah, and so I had to do that, and then I'd kind of put the idea to the side because there are a lot of people who make solo game podcasts, and I was like, am I adding anything to the conversation around that? And ultimately was starting to lean yes. And then actually I visited Philly and went on a little walk with Jeff Stormer and told him about the idea, and his excitement about it was so visceral that I was like, oh, I'm gonna make this show.
you're just like, I gotta do it. Damn.
Yeah. Oh no, that's cool. Yeah, and it also, I think I've talked about this online a little bit, but it's almost embarrassing for me how much I struggle. It is genuinely embarrassing for me how much I struggle with doing things just for myself. Like, I love solo games because I love games. Mm-hmm. I want everything to be a TTRPG all of the time. It is the majority of the way that I filter my experiences. I will be watching a movie and I'll be like, oh, interesting. How could I make a playbook of that? Like, it's what my brain does. And I want to play more solo games. If I have the energy and focus and time to play a solo game, my brain cannot abide me just doing that. It goes like, you should be doing a, independent creative project for this instead. You should be working on one of your games. You should be writing. Be productive in this time instead. You have the energy. And it's fascinating to me because I can veg out and play a video game or something, but it is specifically the type of, like, creative energy needed for solo games that my brain goes, you should be using this for something else. Mm-hmm. And so I realized that as it is genuinely embarrassing for me, but recording it, knowing that I'm not just doing it for me, that I am doing it for a project, that it is going to be released and that it is going to be like something that I can work on, gives me that motivation and it allows me to do it. And so it's interesting because, like, that wasn't a reason that I did it, because I didn't recognize that in myself until after I'd already started making the show, that I was like, ooh, I can just play solo games now because I'm doing it for the show. And then I was like, hey, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Wait, what? Let's examine this.
What do you mean you can play it now because you're doing it for the show? Like, oh, because it's productive when I do it now. And I'm like, that's interesting. So, but it wasn't before, sweetie. Like,
I'm in this tweet. I don't like it.
I know, but it's funny because, like, usually when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about it with people who make podcasts and other people who put work out in the world. So I don't think that necessarily if I told that story to like the greater population, everyone would have a strong reaction to it. But the specific demographic that I'm most likely to tell that story to is usually like, oof.
Neuro weird online weirdos, just a whole group of people like, oh no.
And I think part of the reason I've been talking so long about this is that what it comes down to is it feels too simplistic to say, but I genuinely just got to a point where I was like, I think this would be cool and good and I should make it. Like, it's not necessarily that much deeper than that. I was just like, this seems like something that I can't find evidence of other people doing, and I think that it would be really cool, and I think that it would make it easier to engage with solo games, which I think are like a fascinating design space. And so I'm gonna do it. And then I just sort of, I think that I put out a call just in a few Discords that I'm in being like, hey, I have these 5 games that I'm going to start recording. This was like last summer at this point. If you would be willing to play one of these games, let me know. And I give everybody, this is true to this day, I make a little dossier for every game where I just lay out like, here are the sections, like I'm going to give you the game, but also specifically for recording it, here are the sections of the games. So if you need to take a break, it's easy to take them between these sections without like messing up the flow of everything. And I clarify like, I found this rule difficult to understand. Here's how I'm interpreting it, so that you know if you want to align with me, you can do the same thing. I provide just a whole detailed dossier, and I give people like, you don't have to listen to my recording of it, but if it would help you, if it would make you feel less anxious to like know what I'm looking for, you can listen to the first 20 minutes or whatever of my recording, and you can hear that I will often pause for 3 full minutes while I think, and it isn't an issue if you want to do that. I really try to, because it's something I struggle with, I try to really let people know, like, I'm not controlling their game or anything. Like, I'm not saying, like, here's how you have to play, but I am trying to really give people enough information that they aren't scared they're doing it wrong. Because it is unfortunately one of those things where it comes down to, like, you're probably not doing it wrong. I want to hear your experience of this game, but I also am like that. So, you know, yeah, that got a little off topic, but I thought it would be fun and cool to do, and it turns out it has been.
That's creative stuff. That's the more I'm talking with people, the more it's like, what was the, you know, what was kind of the reason behind doing this? What was you thinking? Like, sounded cool. Yeah, I did it. It's been cool. In a way that's like, part of me is like, well, it has to be more deep than that. And then another part of me is like, it's like, nah, that's pretty, that's pretty good. It's kind of all you need.
And it's so funny because, like, one of the things that you said in sort of the transition into this part of the conversation was you specifically called out how cool it is to hear the playthroughs be in conversation with each other, which is something like I didn't see coming. I recorded the first like batch of episodes, and then I sat down and started editing, and it would have been in the Accomplice series, which was the very first series. Like the other players like made the same choice without knowing, or they referenced the same obscure media or something, or I think very specifically all 3 of us, despite not collaborating at all, like had an emphasis on like slime in our narratives or something like that. It's like, it's these tiny little things in the Imminence series, which is a game where you're playing out the daily life on a like colony ship going through space. Both of my guests independently brought up how in the future football will not exist because of how bad it is for people. They don't know each other. These 2 have never spoken. The game, like, there's a gym in the game. Like you can visit the gym, but it's not about sports. It's and they just both independently were like, well, we're 3,000 years in the future. What kind of sports do people like? Well, they would like football, but it got banned because of the problems. And I was just like losing my mind. And like just the joy that I get when I hear these people who have never interacted or at the very least have never heard each other play this game have a similar reference point is like my brain just like fireworks. Like it's like one of the coolest things, and it makes making the show so much more engaging for me. And like it's become one of my favorite things about it, and is not something that I saw coming literally at all. And it's awesome.
That's so funny, specifically.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, as we banned football, obviously. It's like, did y'all read the same Medium article? Like, what happened?
I'm thinking of, there's a moment in Village Witch, which I have a terrible memory, and that series was a few months ago, and so I've forgotten a lot of it. But I remember specifically being so delighted that Agatha was on that episode specifically because the game asks you, like, what kind of broom do you have? And I answered that very simply. My other guest, Rhiannon, answered that very simply. Like, here's the broom that I have. And Agatha went, I'm going to engage with what it means, like what this game is assuming of you and your cultural context in order to ask some of these questions. And like, I left so much of that conversation from her in because like, it isn't a criticism of the game. It is just like engaging with it and engaging with the concept of like games have invisible mechanics when that come with like genre and cultural expectations and that kind of thing. And like the fact that Rhea and I both just answered the question and then moved on, and Agatha stopped to like critically engage with it and then provide an answer, I was like, this is exactly what I want. Like, I don't need everyone to do it all of the time, but the fact that like getting these different perspectives means that like I am able to show like different parts of the conversation. It's so cool, and it makes me so happy.
That's, as the kids say, the sauce.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, hang on, we got it now.
Yeah.
I'm excited to listen to the rest of that. She's fantastic.
I think it also delighted me because I'm often the one stopping play to be like, oh, that's really interesting. What is this game asking of me? What is this game saying in this moment? And so to have the like genuinely very rare occasion of me just breezing past something and another player being the one to stop and really think it through was like, yay. Yay, we're all like this, or a lot of us are like this. And Agatha is so thoughtful and wonderful with the ways that she engages with games. And yeah, absolutely. Huge highlight.
Yeah, I'm excited to listen to the rest. They're also only an hour, and that's fantastic. Yes. That's so good.
Huge goal of mine. I love long actual plays, but I can struggle under the weight of them. And so very specifically making the show, I'm like, every episode is going to be between 45 minutes and an hour and 15 minutes, preferably right at the hour mark. And 5 is the most episodes that I ever want a series to have. Ideally, they'll have 3 or 4. And so like once a week for like a month or a little under a month, you get like an errand's worth of audio. And that is perfect for me, because that's again, so much of this and so much of creation often is like, what do I want? What am I looking for? And great, how can I do that? So yes, I appreciate that. I love to, and it's also, wow, it's so nice because it means that one recording is 3 weeks of episodes instead of 1 week of episodes. Huge fan of that.
That is always good when one segment of work is more than just one.
Yep.
if you know, that's the smart way to do it. That's what smart people would do. Just gonna take a moment.
Let that sit in the air for a sec.
Just there's none of this left, but I love you have the classic, like the thing my wife does, just put a bunch of water in a jar, whatever.
Did I already put it in the kitchen? I literally only drink out of jars. I often felt like, especially when I was in school, and had to do like Zoom classes, I often felt like I was pranking people because I would have 3 beverages beside me that were all in slightly different jars. And I felt like I was doing a prank show bit where I was like, somebody sees me drinking out of a jar and they're like, okay, I understand that you have a jar. And then I bring a second jar out and they're like, okay, I guess that's fine. And then a third jar enters the mix and it's like, okay, this is a hidden camera show.
Yeah, why are you, what's happening here?
And I'm like, no, I'm just like this.
No, this is just me.
Yeah.
Listen, 3 drinks is the way to go. We all know that TikTok audio. It's fine. What was your first actual play? Do you remember? Like the first actual play you listened to?
Ooh. I suspect it was One Shot. It's hard because everything's sort of it was so long ago that it's genuinely a little bit of a weird mess of things. It was probably One Shot. I know that I listened to a little bit of Party of One in that era as well. And actually, I wasn't a Star Wars fan. And then I don't know why I listened to it. Maybe this is why I think it must have been One Shot first, because I think I already liked some of the performers who were on the Star Wars Campaign podcast. And I didn't know anything about Star Wars when I listened to it. I think that I'd seen the first 2 movies, not chronologically, the first 2 prequels. A girl I was deeply in love with showed them to me when I was a teenager, and then we broke up or whatever happened. And I was like, I'm never going to watch Star Wars because a girl who likes Star Wars broke my heart. And to the point that I once walked out of a classroom where like I was in like a film and theater program, and the teacher like put a Star Wars movie on for us to study, and I left. Like I was like, no.
You're like, no.
I cannot. I will never. And then somehow I ended up listening to Campaign. And then I was like, wait, do I like Star Wars? And then dudes online were so weird about Rey when The Force Awakens happens that I was like, I'm going to go see The Force Awakens because these guys are so mad about it. And then I was like, oh, I like Star Wars. And then I watched all of the Star Wars, and now it's like most of what it's like something I think about a lot. But yeah, so One Shot, Party of One was in there a little bit. Campaign was a huge one. The Adventure Zone, of course. Friends at the Table. And then I think probably some smaller ones like intermingled in there, but that's sort of the general early arc.
It's so it's so interesting because there's so many actual plays now.
Yeah.
That it feels like there was a moment where it's like, what actual play do you listen to? And it's like, well, there's 5. So these are the 5 that I listened to.
Yep. Exactly.
Like, I don't know anyone else who listened to the Penny Arcade Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition actual play.
Oh my God. Yeah. I didn't listen to it, but I remember it now. That's hilarious. Yeah. Well, that was also when there were like 10 podcasts.
Right. Like it was such a big deal that there was a Penny Arcade podcast and that there was a Wizards thing.
Yeah.
And like it was so early that it was just like, what's happening? Who is what? It felt
still forget sometimes that I don't have to explain what podcasts are to people because early on I would be like, yeah, I heard it on a podcast. It's like kind of like a radio show, you know, but like they put them out like episodically online. You can like download them and put them on your iPod Classic, or whatever. And I still catch myself sometimes being like, I heard it on a podcast. And that's, nope, you know what a podcast is. Everybody knows what a podcast is now.
We're here to record a podcast. I don't have to explain it.
100 years old.
God, don't listen. Listen. I say all the time, I'm not actually old, I'm internet old, which is the way I'm just slightly older than most people on the internet. So it's like, yeah, Matt, do you remember podcasts? Like, yeah, dog, I remember freaking I had my big iPod. It was great.
There's also just been such a shift in specifically being old online, in that like there are people who now call themselves very online, and they are, but they only got very online like 5, maybe 10 years ago. And that's a very different type of very online than those of us who maybe had slightly premature access to the internet in the 90s. And I understand there are going to be people out there who are like, oh, you're a baby child. I've been on the internet since 1945 somehow. And like, I get it. But
I was dropping tweets on Normandy.
Different.
Like, it's like, okay, shut up, Grandpa. Like, it's fine.
It is still like, there was 20 years of internet culture that just got completely missed by people who now are so plugged into internet culture. And it does occasionally make me feel wizened.
Yeah, I talk about being online, but I know in my heart that I'm not, because like I wasn't on Neopets. I wasn't on, I never played RuneScape. Like I didn't, and these are the activities of very online people. And these are different types of online. These are different grades of online.
I played a tiny bit of RuneScape, but I wasn't really a game person, but I was very much on Neopets. For sure.
This is interesting to me. So you didn't play RuneScape because you're not very much of a game person. Did your love and obsession with TTRPGs come later? Or was this like an evolution of a thing?
It definitely came later. I think that I might have played one game of D&D in high school. I know that I at least made a character for D&D in high school. I don't remember if I actually successfully played. Really got on that scheduling sucks thing early, if that's the case. But my first like real game was a 5th edition game that I started playing with my friends in 2012, something like that. Maybe a little bit later, probably a little bit later.
I forgot how old 5th edition was for a second.
I know.
I had to take a minute. I was like, what? Yes, that's correct. Okay.
I think that I didn't play 5e properly.
Well, nobody plays 5e properly.
I think that I might be one of the only people who did, because when the person DMing for me is actually on the currently airing Folio series, Connor, and he somehow did this. First of all, hyper like homebrewed stuff, and he did a really incredible job at only presenting mechanics that were interesting to us at the table, and he somehow balanced like the rest of the party was often a lot more of a like combat, let's get into it and hit some things type, and then there was me sending him 3,000 words of like, here's how my character's grandparents met at 2 a.m. and like there was one iconic fight where literally everyone else in the party was fighting and my bard was in the next room, occasionally casting support spells through the door, but also just like reading the spines of the books and being like, it would be like one person's turn would be like, okay, I hit, great, I hit, okay, cool, I'm gonna cast a spell, awesome, I sneak attack, cool. Okay, so Connor, do I recognize the publishing imprint? Like, does it look like one that I've seen before? And I don't know how he balanced it, but it was incredible. And I genuinely, like, when I got into the indie space, I didn't understand a lot of the criticisms of 5th edition because I was like, I was so lucky to be at this table in this like play culture that was collaborative and like generative and cool. I have now subsequently had experiences with a more traditionally run 5th edition game and been like, oh, this isn't for me, actually. That's correct. Okay, I get it. But it took me a while to like understand the criticisms because it just was so much not my experience. And I know that I'm very lucky for that. And I would not play games in the way that I do now if I hadn't had that experience, I think, because you know, my creativity and weirdness was just so fully encouraged in that space that like when I started to make the transition into like specifically the two games that I will have to credit forever in any game that I ever make because they changed my entire brain and how I thought about games were Fiasco and The Quiet Year. And I played those. I started playing those and I was like, oh, this is kind of like what I've been doing, but like we all do it on purpose.
This is what I've been doing, but intentionally.
Yeah.
I love that. That's and I think you unintentionally got to what I think is the biggest problem about it. I don't argue about D&D about 5th edition online anymore because the large amount of people who will disagree with the things that I say are 5 years ago Satah who are having a great time with the not 5th edition game that someone is running for them.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean? It's none of those things. What are you talking about? We're having such a great time. And it's like, not that there's nothing to be gained by disagreeing or arguing with that person because we're having two conversations. And it's that thing of just like, I recognize that that is the case. And all right. I don't need to fight that fight.
No, that's the thing. And like, obviously there are criticisms to be made of 5th edition that go a little deeper, and D&D generally that go a little deeper, that do genuinely need to be addressed when it comes to, and that I guess they are trying to address when it comes to like racialization and all that kind of stuff. Like that's kind of its own thing. But when we're talking about D&D as a game, it like, I think that generally in TTRPGs, we should be way, 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 way better at remembering that we all experience this from our own personal contexts. A table can have a completely, I thought that Fiasco couldn't, this is going to be a funny sentence, I thought Fiasco couldn't go wrong. I had like successfully played Fiasco with so many groups of people. I thought that it just was a perfectly designed game that could not possibly be a negative experience. And I do kind of still think it's perfect. I don't actually disagree with myself on that. But I brought it to a specific group that wasn't ready for it. And it was the most awkward, stilted tabletop experience I've ever had. And I was just like, oh my God, if this was my only experience with this game, I would think it doesn't work. And I wouldn't be wrong, but I also would.
Right.
And just like, with D&D specifically, no, I guess not with D&D specifically. With all TTRPGs, like, you are bringing a specific cultural context and personal experience to your games. 100% of the time, if you're playing a game, you are there. And therefore, like, your experience is going to be different. And it's going to be different based on who you're playing with and their experiences. And, like, that's fine and good. And it does mean that we can't make a lot of definitive statements about things because like I think that a lot of the stuff that I see people criticize 5e for aren't actually flaws of the game, they're flaws of the play culture. Like the expectation, for instance, something that I struggle with in traditional 5e gameplay is the sort of like, what I've gathered is the relatively old school mentality of you make your character siloed, maybe with the DM, but you make your character, and then you bring them to the table, and then all of your characters who you made separately, like, come to the table, and then you figure it out. That isn't in the rules. Like as far, unless I'm completely misremembering, fifth edition D&D never says don't talk to the other players while you make your characters. It
How to
also
make your
doesn't
character. Step
explicitly
one,
tell you
go home.
Mute everybody, like block your players.
Step two, put your phone down, turn it off.
Yeah. And like, it also doesn't tell you to do it collaboratively, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make a ruling either way. And so that is one of the things that you have to decide essentially as a table. A lot of people don't realize they're making that decision because they think this is just how D&D is played.
Mm.
And it isn't even like, it doesn't occur to them that they are making the choice to make their characters separately or talk with each other or do whatever. It's not in the rules. It is play culture. There are a lot of things in D&D specifically, mechanically, that deserve to be criticized and that don't work for people. That is its own thing. But when you're criticizing a game for something that isn't actually in the game, it's just a cultural norm around that type of game. That is a separate conversation, and I think really benefits from being explicitly labeled as such. And it's hard because there are so many bubbles in TTRPGs. You've got your like Reddit OSR, and then you've got your Google Play escapees OSR, and you've got like the NSR and like and then you have your like story gamers that are like also separated into things, and then there's trad gaming, totally different, and then the ways that it overlaps with those things. And all of those groups have their own language and expectations that often don't even agree with each other. And so even people within those groups, you see this a lot in conversations about OSR, there's just so many acronyms and like terminologies that aren't well defined. And so that's why you get the eternal conversation of what even is OSR, because you will have 5 different people being like, well, this is what it is. And they're all right. And they all think that only they're right. And like, I think that those, and then you also have people being like, who are outside of that scene being like, this was me. I was one of these people. I didn't engage with the OSR and NSR scene for years because my only experience with it was dipshit Redditor OSR dudes. And I was like, ew, why would I play those games? Like, the way that they talk about games is weird to me, and like, I don't like their vibes, and so why would I engage with their games? And then I ended up like somehow doing it by accident, basically, and I was like, wait, I love these games. This is so much about the way I want to play. Why didn't I know that? Like, why? And because I just had this like expectation based off of my own experiences and the things that I was playing and the ways that I was seeing people talk about games that I decided was true about those games. And I was wrong. And like,
well, but also you were right, because those dudes' vibes was bad.
Yeah, that's the thing. And it just like, so many of these conversations just cannot go well because they are based fundamentally on misunderstandings of each other's positions. And people are not, as a rule, really great at laying out like, here's an assumption I'm making going into this conversation. This is like a universal thing that people aren't awesome at. And then it gets more complicated when like you're using shared language. And so it seems like you probably have the same assumptions about something, but ultimately you don't, because you're coming from completely different contexts. And I understand that this sounds like very, very broad, and it is in a lot of ways, but it's just something I think about so much because like I love games, and I want to encourage people to like engage with games that aren't what they would normally do and that surprise them. And like, it just, the conversations around it are often like so much more heated than they need to be. And there's like these huge understandings because people aren't like creating a shared baseline of understanding before just kind of plunging into this really emotionally heated conversation for some reason. And I have a lot of feelings about it, obviously. Play culture is separate from rules. It is important, but it's also different, and they have to be talked about differently. That's, I guess, the sum up of most of what I said there.
Reddit bad, rules different.
Yeah.
Well, and social media helps all of this not at all.
I know.
You know,
it's nasty.
In a way that I think like, in the way that like weirdly Reddit is the only one, which I don't know how I feel about Reddit as a social media. That felt weird. But like Reddit feels like the only place where you can post and you can be like, here's a bunch of words. Just here's a bunch of words. And that you could have a discussion in that way, in a way that you just literally can't on any other platform. And intentionally, it's intentional that they do that. And so, you know, when you only have 300 characters, I don't know, whatever it is, you kind of, you know, like you said, like you start with a lot of assumptions. No one is going to start no one's going to be like hot take and then spend 3 posts. Here are all of my assumptions and starting language and definitions.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
I think it would be really sexy if they did, though.
Just in everybody's bio, you have a Google Doc that you add to.
Yeah.
And then you can click through and see all of my assumptions, and then we can have the conversation.
Yeah.
I like the idea of putting assumptions before a hot take, almost like a content warning, where it's like hot take. Okay, here's what I assume.
Yeah.
That would be more beneficial, because you know, the people that I talk to on a regular basis about TTRPGs, I don't agree with 100% of the time. But we don't have conversations like people end up having on social media, because like you said, even if we don't have the same definitions for things, we've known just through existing in the same space for long enough that this person has a different definition. Like when they say this, they mean a different thing, or they think about these types of games differently than I do. And so they're going to inevitably have a different definition and vibe and feel. And so like when they say something, they're not attacking me, and I don't need to yell about it, you know?
It is so much easier to have those conversations as actual conversations between people. Like I have so many conversations with people where they'll make a statement and I will like to take 2 different things from their statement and be like, just want to make sure I understand, when you say this, what is it that you're talking about specifically? Like, or what experience is it that you've had that makes you feel this is true? I might agree with you. Right now, I don't think I do, but I think that's because I don't understand where you're coming from. But I think we can fix that. And maybe I still won't agree with you, but like we both come away from that conversation with a much better understanding of what we were even talking about. And it's fun to me to have like, I like being made to think more deeply about things that I believe. And so like, I like encouraging that in those conversations with other people. I think most people do, as long as like they don't feel like they're being attacked for it. And you have to be able to slow down for sure. And you have to be able to like give people a lot of grace and not assume that you're correct at all times. It's really important to just kind of enter conversations as much as possible with like, you know, the general belief that other people probably basically know what they're talking about, and then just like figure out why they think the things that they do. And it is possible. It's a lot harder if you also want engagement and you only have 300 characters to do it. Shout out to Paper Cult, a forum that, like a very old school style forum that recently had a revival that is all about like TTRPGs and stuff. It like a renaissance of that type of space, that sort of commons, I guess, digital commons, like I think can only be good for the TTRPG scene, and probably for most scenes, probably for most people.
I didn't know
the forums aren't without their stuff, but
I didn't know you're on Paper Cult. That's fun.
Oh yeah, I'm kicking around. Occasionally, I remember to talk about folio on there, but not all the time.
I'm the one. I have it like pinned so that I don't forget about it. But then I just log in and I'm just like, what's going on?
Yep.
And then it'll be like 2 weeks and I'll be like, oh, hey, right, what's going on?
The speed, it's such a relief to me, the speed of forums, because like, yeah, I will have a busy week or a forgetful week or whatever, and then I'll go in and I'll check out some new posts and I'll reply to a thread. And it's like, cool. I didn't like miss out on everything because I didn't happen to be logged into Discord in the hour and a half that it was happening. It's really nice.
Oh, where was that conversation? Oh, like 157 messages back.
How much of this do I have to read to have context so that I can reply without hurting someone's feelings or whatever?
I miss the very specific online experience I had in college. It was so specific and targeted. I had a podcast. It always comes back to podcasts. I had an anime review podcast that I listened to. And I say review, it was bullshit. You talk about anime. And then I was on their forums, and fairly active forums from like the hosts and a bunch of people who listen to the podcast. And then I was in the WoW guild from this, which was 11 of us. So it was just like, oh yeah, listen to the podcast, come home, troll around on the forum a little bit, like read some websites, whatever. And that was it. That was online. And that was all you needed. And then I'd log into Mumble to raid.
Yeah.
And we were free.
That was an era. That sure was an era.
Remember when things were good?
No.
Yeah, no. It's before Reagan and neither of us were alive, so. We're coming up on 2 hours. I could do the fun way that happens with every interview. I could do this forever. This could be a 6-hour podcast as easily as it is a 2-hour podcast.
Absolutely.
But you know, out of respect for everybody's time, we're gonna come to a close. The thing I always say I would love to have you on in the future. Thank you so much for your time now. Thank you for coming on and chatting with me and chatting with everybody.
This was wonderful. This was really lovely.
So we talked at the top about homework. Do you have so for people who don't know, homework is the sort of opportunity for whoever is on the podcast to say, hey, here are cool things that I want you to check out. It can or cannot be related to what they're here to talk about originally. It can just be whatever cool thing they think you should check out in addition to what we're talking about. So, Seda, what do you have for us?
Yeah, I specifically want to recommend 2 nonfiction books. One of them was the last book that I read last year, and one of them is a book that I am currently reading. The book I'm currently reading is called Slow Down, the Degrowth Manifesto, which is a book that engages very deeply with the idea of degrowth from for ecological reasons from a Marxist perspective. The author is clearly just a giant nerd for Marx in a way that I deeply respect. And I think that it has a lot of really interesting and cool stuff to say about Marxist thought and what a society that is in collaboration with the environment could look like if we engage with it in a way that isn't capitalistic. Mandatory caveat, obviously I don't agree with every single thing in the book and I haven't finished it, so maybe he'll take a crazy turn in the last couple chapters and I will renounce it forever, but I think that it is really, really worth listening to. I have been really appreciating the ways that it's making me think about stuff. And similarly, I want to recommend the book How Infrastructure Works by Deb Chatra. It is a book that also was clearly written from the perspective of somebody who is nerding out really hard about the thing that they're talking about. It's a very different tone. Degrowth is very like understandably panicked in some ways because it's addressed not panicked. I wouldn't say panicked, but it's intense. It is addressing the climate catastrophe that we are currently in, and so it has a very intense tone to it. How Infrastructure Works is much more hopeful and beautiful, and it is as the title says, it's talking about how does water get to you? When you make dinner, if you're boiling a pot of pasta, like, how did the water get into the pot? How does the electricity for your stove get to you? Where was the wheat for the pasta grown? Where was it sent to get processed? How did it end up on your shelf? Where were the tomatoes for the sauce grown? How did they get there? And it just like, it provides this like beautiful, optimistic look at the world of like the ways that we are all connected by our systems of infrastructure, that it definitely like has an ultimate message of like, hey, we need to have some major change if we're going to continue having a planet and a population. But I think that it does it in a way that is so full of joy that it is like a really wonderful read or listen in a way that I found very like inspiring and also just validating for me personally, because it I've never heard somebody talk about the world in the way that is so thoroughly how I understand it. And that was just really what, like, you know, you're walking down the aisle of a dollar store and you look at like the stupidest object you've ever seen and you're like, somebody had to design that, and then like 4 people had to approve it, and then it had to get made, and then like a billion of them had to get made, and then it had to come here, and then it probably had to go other places. Why? Who did that? How did that happen? And just like this like weird like interconnected like, oh my god, the world is so huge and like everything is here all at once in every single object. That is something that brings me a lot of joy. I understand that for some people it's a little existentially terrifying. I still really, really encourage you to engage with it. And those 2 books, I think, are a good sort of combination of ways to think about our systems and how they could be good, even though they currently are not.
I gotta say, I like the sound of both of those, and I like them in conversation with each other. Like the 2 of them together, I think is a really fantastic combo.
Yeah.
That's great. I love people recommending books. I especially love nonfiction books. I have not ever read one nonfiction book because the real world is scary and I don't want to know more about it. But I will say how infrastructure works sounds incredibly interesting.
I've experienced both of them through audiobooks. I find I can't listen to fiction audiobooks, but I love nonfiction in audiobook form. And I think that it definitely lends a lot to it because you can hear the excitement, basically, especially in how infrastructure works. And it's really delightful. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. And then for the end, the surprise question, the 3 question. This is a question I asked at the end of the first episode. I asked the wonderful Star who her top 3 guests would be to have on her podcast, and since then I've always asked the guests a top 3 question that I come up with over the course of the podcast. It's just a silly way to end out the podcast, just, you know, whatever. And okay. So, Satah, your top 3. What are your top 3 favorite Star Wars alien species?
Oh, what's their name? Oh my goodness.
The fun hidden game of what are they called?
I think that the species is called Dathomirians.
This can be open book.
They have, I think it might be what Maul might be one, and they have 2 hearts and they're carnivorous. And I love that for them. Is
this the weird lore thing where I think Maul is, hang on, this might be a weird canon thing. I think Darth Maul is the species that's not a Dathomirian but looks exactly the same as a Dathomirian.
I think that you are correct.
Because Star Wars.
I do love this is the thing. So much of my love for Star Wars came from the campaign podcast. that
That's fair.
I'm really only thinking of them. Like, I'm like, I love Rhodians because Leanit Gilo.
Lena Gilo's the best AP character nobody knows.
I know.
Nobody knows.
I agree. I very much agree. I'm actually the sleeve that I have, the tattoo sleeve. It has a reference to my game, the game of Galactic that I played where I met Jess. There is a reference to that game in my sleeve. I went to my tattoo artist and I was like, I want you to make me this cool sci-fi sleeve. You do whatever you want, but the two things that I want are a droid that is the shape of a skateboard, and I want a tiny Leanit Gilo. And I don't have that yet, but there will be a Leanit Gilo reference in this tattoo. I have done a lot of personal growth to not relate to Leanit Gilo as strongly as I used to, but he was a very important character to me for a very long time.
Then you need to get a custom made eye patch armband.
Yeah.
So that you can swap it as necessary.
Exactly, and a wig.
The species is Zabrak, and he is a Dathomirian Zabrak. That's right, because there were Zabraks, and there's two different flavors of Zabrak.
Yeah.
Can you tell I'm also a bit of a Star Wars nerd?
I'm so new to it that like my nerdery is like so specific.
That's
you know,
fair.
like I'm like I know a lot about this one thing, but it is a relatively like late addition to my life.
The power of Cat Cool is making Star Wars seem interesting.
The best GM in actual play history? Yes. That is something I very strongly
I'll stand by it.
There are a lot of really good ones. Like not the only good one, but for my money, the best. I don't know if I love Chiss or if I just love Thrawn.
That's fair. That's a fair feeling to have.
I don't really know what they've got going on besides creating Thrawn. They're probably terrible because they created Thrawn, but like,
I think
love whatever that guy's got going on.
I don't think there's any other Chiss other than Thrawn.
I'm pretty sure I might be totally wrong, but I think that it's one of those things where Thrawn existed and then they had to like they created the species afterwards.
Yeah, they made he made Thrawn and then it's like, okay, well, what do we call him?
Yeah. It's like how there can be a baby Yoda now.
I think isn't what's it? No, I guess he isn't a Chiss. The bounty hunter guy. I guess not, because he's not on this page talking about the Chiss, so. Good to know they're omnivores. That's important information to have.
Yeah, apparently this is just something that we know about a lot of Star Wars species.
I need to have a lore versus canon super podcast where I just have like folio style. I just have interviews with 20 different people and then we just weave through it.
Yeah. I literally I will watch Star Wars or I will read Star Wars stuff and like I will have a moment of like, oh, just like in the campaign podcast. Like, well, I think that might be reversed, sweetie. Like, I think that they probably,
that's
I think that didn't come from them.
That's fine. You live your life. You enjoy yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
You technically have one more, but you can also have as many as you want.
Oh,
the secret rule to the top 3 is it's as many as you want.
Yeah, I mean, so what did I say? I said Zabrak. I said maybe Chiss, but maybe not. And I'll stick with Rodian because they got those stars in their eyes.
That's fair. I think Rodians are solid, just across the board. Rodians are very Star Wars. You can't go wrong. You got a Star Wars thing going on, put a Rodian in there. You'll have a good time.
The full truth of it is just that I am so much more of a droid person than anything else that like I just kind of forget. I'm like, well, anybody who isn't a droid is just some guy. And like they all look different and they do different stuff, but like they're just some guy.
I love that though. I love the specificity, right? You can't get mad at somebody who like loves a thing. Like how can I be mad that you love droids? Who am I?
Yeah.
How could I do that?
Yeah.
on that note.
Exactly. I cannot be criticized.
Yeah, you can't criticize my love for this.
No.
So the play culture around Star Wars, that's what the problem is, okay?
You know, maybe.
Oh yeah, that's a different podcast.
There's an argument to be made.
Can't. I mean, we could get into it. We can't.
Yeah.
We can't.
No.
That's not. We'll have to schedule that
This
one. You
isn't
want to
the
do
6-hour podcast. Yeah.
But that's gonna have to be it. Satah, thank you so much again for coming and spending time. Give everybody a quick outro again if for somehow they forgot your super long website name.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Satah, they, them pronouns. You can find me on Blue Sky, which, as I've already said, I hate, but I'm on there at poseidonships.gaygothvibes.online. You can find my work generally at gaygothvibes.online. I work in TTRPG spaces doing editing and design and stuff. I am a musician and I make a podcast about solo games with multiple people playing them called Folio, which you can find around foliopod.card.co and also Folio Pod on Blue Sky.
That's fantastic. But that's gonna be it. Say bye, everybody. And that's the interview and another episode done. I first want to thank Satah so much for coming on the podcast. Galactic and Going Rogue both look fantastic. I'm so excited about each of them individually as a product. I'm so excited about the actual plays that were put together around them. And they were just honestly such a delight to talk to. As always, you can find all of the links to Satah's various projects, including their music project, People You Meet Outside of Bars, which still makes me laugh, in the show notes. Please check it out. Check everything that's going on. Galactic and Going Rogue should still be on Kickstarter by the time you hear this, unless there's been some massive problem or you're listening to this well in the future. And I urge everyone to go check out Folio. I think Folio is a fantastic example of a very approachable actual play podcast that I think if you enjoy TTRPGs, you should absolutely check out. As always, I want to thank everybody for listening. I've said this before, I love getting the email every week and seeing all of the downloads. So thank you to everybody that's checking out the new episodes, that's listening along. It is, this has been such an amazing thing to work on and see people get really excited about. If you've been enjoying it, I would ask that you rate the show wherever you are listening to it. Ratings help it somehow in the computer stuff, or tell a friend. It's kind of a more direct and actionable way to spread the word. And if you're able, you could mosey on over to Patreon and you could help pay for the bills for this show. I would greatly appreciate it. It's not a huge drain, but every little bit helps. All the audio episodes are syncing over there automatically, so you can check those out if you don't have a podcatcher for whatever reason. And I'm going to be working on putting the video versions up there as well, for people who don't want to watch them on YouTube or don't want to deal with ads or whatever goes on YouTube. Don't forget, if you're looking for cool games, we are, air quotes, sponsored by RPG Zine Club. Thank you again to Tony. We have a discount code over at the Plus One EXP store. You can go to plusOneEXP.com and use the code WDPodcast, all one word, at checkout for 10% off any purchase, physical or digital, or 10% off your first month of your Zine Club membership, which I highly, highly recommend. I signed up just this past month, and I'm really excited to sit down, dig into the games, see what's going on. I already know one of them that's coming out next month. Tony gave me a little sneak peek. It sounds really exciting. I just love the idea of small, direct games every month that helps, get stuff in front of people and helps fund bigger projects. And the work that Tony and Plus One EXP have been doing is phenomenal. So again, that's WD Podcast, all one word, at the Plus One EXP store for 10% off an order or your first month of Zine Club. I have a very busy week ahead of me, so I'm going to get out of here. But as always, I will see you in the next one.